Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel for this deep dive into Project Zomboid's recent success, why it has 20 times the average player count it had this time last year, and what exactly makes it the most detailed and intricate zombie survival game that is currently on the market. This won't be so much as a review of the game as it will be a recounting of events and some of the features that make it so unique. If you do find the video entertaining or useful, make sure to drop it a like, it helps me out greatly, and of course subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more Project Zomboid stuff. So let's start with a bit of Project Zomboid history. The game first hit Steam on November 8th of 2013. Yes, you heard me, it goes back that far. More so even, since it had some crowdfunding projects behind it first, before it even came to early access on Steam, like most indie games do. During the month of its early access arrival on Steam, Project Zomboid clocked a peak player count of about 1,020 players, with an average of 411 players. The game had its die-hard community of fans and a few spikes in interest along the way, but October of 2019 is when Zomboid gets its first big break. On October 16th, 2019, Build 41 was released. Now this is 6 years on from the original 2013 release. Now, anyone that happens to be watching this as a big supporter of the game or someone that's played it quite a lot, you will already know what this is, but for those of you that are checking it out for the first time, it's sort of something you hear about and are probably wondering why the hell Build 41 is such a big deal. So, I took it upon myself to play a little bit of Build 40 and put this side by side with some footage from Build 41. You see the difference? Aside from a massive graphical update, Build 41 also brought in a host of new features and content for players to enjoy, such as an overhauled combat system, resulting in an influx of players and the average player count climbing to 1,132 in October of 2019 and 1,616 in November of the same year. Now, Build 41 was a huge step for Project Zomboid, and throughout 2020, the player count holds at around this level as the game continues to improve. During 2021, a wave of content creators start to pick up the game and seemingly become aware that the game has been massively overhauled. This in turn transfers to their audiences, and Project Zomboid climbs massively in popularity. By August of that same year, and keeping on until November, they averaged a player count of around 5,000 players, so already the game has seen a huge popularity increase. But what's important for me to make note of here is that when Build 41 was released in October of 2019, there was no multiplayer for this build, and thus it was available as an opt-in beta for anyone that owned the game. Now, that's not the state that the game comes in, obviously, so if you weren't aware that Build 41 existed, maybe you don't follow the blog posts, or you're not on the Discord, or you're just playing because you saw it on the market, then you're going to have no idea that Build 41 exists. Now, at this time, Indie Stone are working on multiplayer, providing updates via their regular Thursday news posts, and all this time you've got a steadily increasing player count, with many eyes on the game and plenty of people who are holding off from purchasing because there's no multiplayer. This is most definitely a perfect storm in the making for Indie Stone, and in December of 2021, multiplayer drops. Up until this point, the peak player count achieved for Project Zomboid was 8,534 players at one time. The average in November is 4,958. In December, following the release of multiplayer, the average player count skyrockets to 20,322 players, and the peak was 53,071 players. As of January 26th, the date that this script was written, the average player count in the last 30 days was 42,000. So that's a brief history of Project Zomboid's rise to the top of the Steam charts and where it rests now. But why is it proving to be so popular? What about Project Zomboid makes it so playable? For the next segment of the video, I do just want to preface this by saying that this is just my opinion and dissection of the game based on many hundreds of hours of playtime spent in the world, and it's my opinion, it's not fact. So if you disagree and think that the game isn't that great, then that's absolutely fine, I understand. But the statistics don't lie on this one. The majority of players enjoy it, and it's incredibly loved by its community. And here's my thoughts on why. Now, Project Zomboid for new players can be both challenging, confusing, and even infuriating at times, and this is what often decides if Project Zomboid is a game that the player will enjoy. Those first few days of learning the game are absolutely the hardest, and this is both what pushes some players away while simultaneously being what most players enjoy. Project Zomboid is a brutal and yet beautiful symphony of a challenging PvE threat, constant pressure to prepare for what's next in an ever-evolving world, and the inevitability that you will often learn through your mistakes, and these mistakes are going to be fatal. All of this serves to remind you that the game's ultimate motto is, "This is how you died." Oh no! Oh no, not like this! Oh! You aren't some hero, you aren't going to figure out the cure for the virus, and you're most certainly not going to escape. Ultimately, you are going to meet your death, and all you can do is try to make it further and further each time. And yet, if you're the type that enjoys a challenging and punishing experience that teaches you to go further on each playthrough, then Zomboid can be a fantastic gaming experience. To touch on just how detailed this game really is, I think it's best that I give you a few examples. The world itself is always changing in Project Zomboid, with several events taking place that will bring the player a new challenge and force them to either adapt or die trying. And with the way Zomboid is, it's often the second one. At a certain point, both power and running water shuts off. This is one of the many milestones for survivors to reach. Players will need to prepare for these two events by several means. You can find and relocate fridges and freezers to your base, then acquire a generator to power your base once the power goes out. But where some games would stop there, that isn't enough for Project Zomboid. You'll also need to find a magazine to learn how generators work, teaching your character to maintain and use them. Lastly, you'll need fuel to power the generator, which requires you to find a gas can to carry it. Then you need to fill it at a gas station. Oh, and if the power is already out, well, you're going to need another generator to actually power the pumps so that you can gather fuel. Or, well, you can siphon it from a vehicle. You can see how something as simple as this gets complex quickly, but gives you as the player a handful of extra goals to keep you pushing forward and giving you something to aim for. This is ultimately where Zomboid gets its replayability. Another example is the weather system. When you first start your game, by default, you will be in the first week of July. You can keep track of the date and time by finding and equipping a watch. And whilst I'm at it, if it's a digital one, you can set an alarm to wake your character up too. With the different seasons comes different weather conditions. You'll get the full spectrum, including thunderstorms, dense fog, blizzards, and periods of intense heat. If you're a farmer, this presents challenges such as keeping your crops watered or growing them fully before the snow of winter starts to fall. And to help with this, you can actually track the next day's weather conditions using a radio. Now, if you can find a radio with the emergency broadcast channel, which I should mention is set to a random frequency in each playthrough, you can then get a heads up on the weather conditions for the next day, allowing you to plan out your actions accordingly. Lastly, the weather presents the need for different types of clothing. If you aren't ready for winter, it'll eat you alive, with cold temperatures and harsh winds. This trend goes for Project Zomboid as a whole. Everything has multiple layers, and learning those individual parts that make up a complex system serve to keep you alive ever so slightly longer than the last time you played, and provide you with that sense of accomplishment. Every single step you take further into the game is one that you're going to enjoy, and one that keeps you coming back for more. So you've had the history of Project Zomboid's journey to the top of the Steam charts, you've had my thoughts on why it's got people playing so much, and to end the video, I wanted to touch briefly on what's to come for Project Zomboid in the future. Now, I covered this in a different video fairly recently in a bit more detail as the devs gave us their plans for 2022, and I'll leave that on the end screen of this video if you want to dig a bit deeper into that, but I'll keep it brief here. Essentially, the next major update will bring in crafting advancements which are going to take place as part of an expanded crafting tree. We don't know much about what this is going to look like at this time, but the community is making some pretty positive noises about it, since endgame is sort of where Project Zomboid lacks right now. So you reach a certain point in the game and either a multiplayer server will need to reset, or in a solo run you just sort of say, well, that's it, I'm self-sufficient now, guess I won. So The aim of these updates is to increase the playability in the later stages and eventually develop a longer lasting gameplay loop that could potentially go on for years of in-game time, which is pretty exciting stuff. But the big one we're all waiting for is NPCs. These are planned for some point in the future, with the first iteration of NPCs being aimed for build 43, and we're in build 41 right now. Again, we aren't sure how this is going to shape up, but the possibilities are pretty endless here, and the developers have already mentioned a bunch of cool systems that they have code for already. It's just what they can actually get situated within the game and how well it will all mesh together. So the future for Project Zomboid is looking bright, and hopefully this video gave you a bit of an insight into where the game has come from to get to the pedestal that it's on now. And if you want to find out more about the game, please do feel free to stop by on my Twitch channel and drop me a follow there. I'm often live playing Project Zomboid, and you can always ask me some questions in real time. Otherwise, I've got a bunch of videos on the channel to help you in the early stages of your experience. Special shout out to all of my patrons for supporting the channel, grabbing themselves a whitelist for our Project Zomboid server, and being a part of my amazing community. Link is in the description if you're interested in joining them on the server and potentially playing with me or some other creators. Thanks folks, and I'll see you all in the next one.